Alright guys, I have finally obtained all the parts to restore my rat's nest and my fuel system. As you can see, the car is bone stock. It only has about 45,000 miles on it. I'm doing this strictly as a preventative maintenance. There's not going to be any changes to the operation of the car. Everything runs great right now. Sequentials operate perfectly. I'm calling this maintenance because if you know anything about RX7s, the Fuel Pulsation Dampener has a tendency to leak externally and be a cause for possible fires, which we want to avoid, obviously. But also for the continued operation of the sequentials, this being 30 years old and the original engine, all the vacuum lines are rock hard. If you look at them wrong, they're going to crack, and then your solenoids are not going to operate properly. All your actuators aren't going to get the right vacuum or pressure to operate the sequential system. When I bought the car, I did have an issue with the secondary coming online. I fixed the solenoid that was the culprit with that. Ever since, everything's been running great. My goal for this car is OEM Plus. This being a low mileage, completely stock car, I want to keep it fairly close to stock. All the mods reversible to where I can put it back to stock. I do have an auto EXE intake I'm going to be putting on, but as for right now, I'm just going through and restoring this thing. It doesn't really need much restoration, but I consider maintenance on a 30-year-old car restoration. I'm going to be pulling out all the injectors, having them cleaned at a local shop here. I'm going to be replacing all the fuel lines, all the vacuum lines. I bought every solenoid. I figured if it lasted 30 years, if I do it all again, it's going to last another 30 years. So I've always had a motto: do it right the first time, and you won't have any issues down the road. On top of the fuel system and vacuum lines, I also got plug wires. If you know RX7s, the coil packs are underneath the intake manifold, so it's just much easier to get to. I've already done all the general maintenance when it comes to the fluids, the plugs, everything else. Alright guys, here's some of the parts pile. Mainly solenoids, fuel pulsation dampener, fuel pressure regulator. This right here is the fuel line to the secondary rail. Like I said, I'm replacing all the fuel lines. It's 30 years old. Even if the other one feels like it's in condition, it's peace of mind to replace all rubber fuel lines. Definitely don't want a fuel leak and a fire down the road. Injector Gromets. These are the injector diffusers. In addition, spark plug wires. These are not just your typical NGK. These are the power cable, so they are thicker, lower resistance, just better spark. I'm not looking at seeing any performance gains. Like I said, this is all just maintenance stuff, but these NGKs actually have a pretty good reputation, and they really weren't that expensive, especially when you compare them to like the MSD sets and whatnot. One thing that is new to me, which is going to be super nice, I haven't done one of these in years, since I hadn't been working on cars for a while, but JP3, they make really cool stuff like this. Doesn't look like much, but it's going to be a nice little block off for when you pull the intake manifold off. Make sure you don't drop anything down there. It's just a little plate. You don't have to have it. We used to just use tape, but this is going to be, to me, these are super cheap. Well worth the price. Peace of mind to not accidentally drop something down the intake or lean on it and bust through the tape. So yeah, JP3 makes some really good stuff. Check their website out. I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I do love supporting the rotary community. JP3 is one of those companies that they've continued to make awesome parts for the FDs, even though they're really old. There's not really that many out there in comparison to like a lot of the modern vehicles, but they continue to make quality parts for us. So I'm going to support any solid rotary shops and companies that's going to support me.
I'm not going to go over how to remove the upper intake manifold because there's plenty of videos on how to do that. I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible given the actual amount of work you have to do and concentrate on the rat's nest and fuel system restoration. I've seen a few different rat's nest videos and I have not seen any how-tos the way I do it. This is my way of restoring the vacuum lines and solenoids, and I personally think it's easier than some of the methods I've seen in the past and the write-ups I've found online.
Alright guys, I got the upper intake manifold off. Here's what the factory rat's nest looks like. It's a cluster. It's a lot of people are afraid of it. You can see some of these hoses I have already replaced, the ones I can reach with the manifold on when I was fixing my secondary control. These have been replaced. Ones like this have not, and it's rock hard, not moving. So you actually, if you lean on these, they actually just kind of disintegrate in your fingers. But that's why we're doing this, along with replacing all these solenoids that are under here. In order to do that, you have to take out the coil packs here. I'm having the injectors cleaned as well, which is also underneath the rat's nest. And I'll take video of that when I get down to that point. It's really not too bad to pull off the upper intake manifold. There's plenty of how-tos on how to do it. Pretty simple. It takes, probably 20 minutes or so. This is the JP3 plate I was talking about. It comes in super handy. That way I don't have to worry about dropping anything down in the lower intake manifold. But there you have it. Factory RX7 rat's nest. Alright guys, got the rat's nest out, got everything else out. Unhook the wiring harness. You can peel it back like this. Be careful with it. It's usually pretty crunchy. It's really not too bad of a job. Take your time. Be easy on the plugs. As the injectors, you got your primary injectors down here. There's your secondary rail up here. If you're going to do the injectors, now's the time. You don't want to unbolt it first and try to fight these Phillips head while it's out. Since they're bolted in, this is the best time to actually loosen those and get the injectors out before you pull the fuel rails out. Side note, a lot of people don't realize that there's a type of screwdriver, it's JIS, I believe it's Japanese Industrial Standard, that actually fits these a lot better, as well as the ones on the side down here. So I'll have to deal with these when I pull the rail out to replace this fuel line and the pulsation dampener right here, and also the fuel pressure regulator on the secondary back there. A lot of people strip those out if they don't use the right screwdriver. But yeah, that's where we're at now. Another little nugget: keep some spare spark plugs around. They work great for plugging hoses, fuel lines, as you can see. Also transmission coolers, so you don't make a mess when you're working on something like that. Also, if you're gonna be pulling fuel lines off, I recommend cracking the gas cap. Make sure you can let the gas tank vent, because throughout the day, if it heats up, and it'll actually push fuel out of these hoses if you don't have them plugged up. But just a little precaution. There you have it. Alright guys, we've got the rat's nest out of the car. It's honestly really not a bad job. It took me probably a little over 2 hours, and that's really taking my time. Get distracted, talking with kids, a few other things. The main thing is, like I said, take your time. Be careful with all the connectors. Everything's 30 years old. Everything's real brittle. Couple main things to note. You have to take the coil packs off first. There's essentially 4 bolts. There's 2 down here, 2 up there are actually nuts actually. So take these 4 10mm nuts off. You'll be able to wiggle it out of the car here, like that. Make sure you put the vacuum lines like that, and it comes off. And this is what the coil packs look like when you pull them out. That will essentially leave you with just the frame in the car. And here's where some of the write-ups can be, I believe, misleading. In my opinion, this is the best way to remove it if you're going to be restoring the rat's nest. If you're going for a delete, if you go single turbo and you're planning on pulling all this off, then it really doesn't matter. You can start cutting things, but what people don't realize is you have the fuel lines and coolant lines attached to the rat's nest bracket. They're essentially two different brackets. You'll read up source, they say you have to take off the alternator to get this out. The reason why they say that is because you have these screws right here that hold this coolant line and this bracket here to the actual solenoid bracket. So the alternator sits right here, and then, you know, they think you have to get this screw out in order to get this off, but you don't. You can pull this whole thing off in one shot. All you have to do is remove this coolant hose right here. There's 3 fuel lines back here. It's actually 2 fuel lines, feed and return, and then I believe that's your evap line, and then 2 fuel lines here for your feed and your return. So as long as you pull those hoses off, and then in here there's going to be a ground with a bolt here, 2 bolts there, and a bolt there, and that's all that's holding this down. From there, you just have to pull your vacuum lines off. Again, be real careful if you're trying to save them, if you're trying to save your solenoids. With me, I'm replacing all my solenoids, all my vacuum lines, but I like to pull this off as one unit. That way I can actually measure each vacuum line to be the exact perfect size. That way I don't have something too long or too short. If it's too long, it could be rubbing on something. You'll rub a hole through your line, and you'll create a vacuum or a pressure leak for your solenoids. The only vacuum lines I did not leave on are for your oil injectors and fuel pressure regulator, and then a few of the other ones that stay on the car for some of the splitters. But you can see the difference. These ones are the ones I had already replaced that I could get to. See how they're nice and malleable. And then these ones I have not. You can see how that's real firm. I mean, if I just pull that, it'll break right off. Which I'm just going to measure the hoses first, and go one vacuum by one vacuum to measure, cut, and then I'll replace the solenoid to fit it. As I also mentioned, a lot of people don't realize is the Phillips head screwdriver side. There is what's, I think it would be considered a metrics Phillips head. If you don't have a set of these screwdrivers, it's JIS, Japanese Industry Standard, I believe. That's where like people strip out all these little Phillips head for the injectors, for the ones on the side. Regular Phillips head can work, but the JIS ones actually fit really nicely in there, and they come off pretty good. For the really maybe rusty cars, or you know, they've been sitting for a while, sometimes I'll put the screwdriver in and I'll tap the back with the hammer while you're trying to back it out, and it works kind of like a little impact. That tends to work sometimes. A couple other things to mention. These Viton check valves. So this is not the factory one. This is one I got off a forum member on RX7club.com. Dale Clark. If you want to hit him up, he sells them. This is what they look like. They're industrial. They handle the heat and everything. The factory ones, you can see this one was already just split when I got my car. That was also part of my sequential issue. I was tracking them down, and you see that's kind of an issue there. You can also see how brittle this stuff is. It's cracking when you split that way. I mean, this is a 45,000 mile car, so it's fairly low mileage. If you get a car with 100,000 miles, these things are going to be significantly more brittle, but I did have ones down low that were even worse, that were brittle. One issue I had was the solenoid, the actual nipple broke off the solenoid, and that was hurting my secondary, and that was my main cause, along with small issues like this, and that's the one that this replaced. And these are all one-way valves. They're meant to either hold vacuum or pressure. This is your vacuum tank on the top. This actually holds vacuum.
Vacuums suck!
When you're replacing your vacuum lines, you want to make sure if you're going to be using silicone, you want to get high quality silicone with a really thick wall. If you look at this, how well the camera can see that. Let's see if it focuses in on that. See how thick the sidewalls are? That makes it to where if you have a tight turn, you see some of these like a 180 degree turn, it's not going to kink. When you bend that, it's not going to kink. They'll still have good flow. They stand up to the heat real well. I've seen a lot of kits that are really thin wall like this, and actually under boost and heat, you'll see them pop. They actually expand like a balloon and they pop. So that's one thing to look out for. There's plenty of threads on rx7club.com that'll tell you how many feet of what size hose you need. Let me see what size. These are like a 3.5 millimeter, 6 millimeter. 3.5 millimeter I think is going to fit all these. I don't remember. I ordered this stuff a while back. All right, so another thing I would recommend getting if you're planning on doing this job is just getting online, printing out a couple of these sheets. You could just search FD3S vacuum diagram, and about 100 of these is going to pop up in a Google search. This one is the standard one that somebody actually color coded pretty nicely, so you can see everything. Mine's going to be a little bit different because it is JDM, has no EGR, so the EGR will be missing. If you're planning on doing what people call simplified sequential, which the name is really misleading. It's not really simplifying anything with the sequential. It actually has nothing to do with the sequential. It's just emissions removal, EGR, ACV, things like that. You'll see all this. Somebody actually went through the time and deleted all the pipes, so they'll only color code what's needed for the sequential operation. Similarly, you can get them to where it's just removal of everything non-necessary other than your oil injectors, your fuel pressure regulator, things like that. If you're going single, pretty much everything will be removed. So you can find a bunch of these, print those out. Same thing with this. This is just kind of like the order of the solenoids on the rack. They are also color coded. They have like colored dots on them on the actual rack. A lot of the solenoids you can see have the same part numbers. That one takes 3 of them. So it's just kind of handy. I always print these up and put them in my work area while I'm working on this, and just kind of saves some time, you know, switching back and forth to the internet or your phone or something like that, and you can mark on them and whatnot. This is why I leave some of the vacuums on the car. These ones I already replaced. You can get to these with the manifold on, the upper intake manifold on. But like this vacuum here, it goes down to the oil injector. It's harder to get out, and since I'm pulling the fuel rails out, that'll be easier to replace that way. Same thing. There's another injector over here, and the fuel dampener here. This is a fuel pulsation dampener. This is the part that has a tendency to leak, so that's general maintenance item as well. Alright, pulled the fuel rails off. Injectors are already taken out. I took those down to a great local shop to have professionally cleaned. This is what the fuel rails look like. This is the primary, and this is the secondary. You can see I pulled it out as one assembly. You can pull them out as separate. You gotta take this off. I'm replacing all the rubber hoses within the fuel system just as a general maintenance precaution. This part right here is the fuel pulsation dampener. This is what's known to leak on FDs, NFCs as well. So this is definitely a general maintenance item. Always replace that. Since I'm in here, I'm also replacing the fuel pressure regulator. These aren't really known to leak, but if it does go bad, you're not going to get rising fuel rate along with boost. So since I'm already tearing down, I'm going to just replace everything. Like I said, this is just as a like general maintenance and restoration. Same goes with this hose. This is an actual special hose. You can see it's got a banjo fitting. These are the Phillips head screws I keep mentioning that people strip out all the time. To make sure you get the right screwdriver for that. They're not too bad. But time to clean these things up, get the new lines and parts installed. And there you have it. You got a new fuel line, new fuel pulsation dampener, and a new fuel regulator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some new fuel line exactly to these lengths. I'm also going to replace the clamps with some screw clamps. That'll be a little bit better. These things tend to, after you use them a few times, they kind of lose their tension. So I'm not going to trust reusing these. Not to mention, if I didn't buy factory fuel lines like this, which they are no longer available, the hose diameter can be slightly different from aftermarket hose. So these may not actually have the correct tension. So if it's a little bit thinner, a little bit thicker, you're going to have a rough time. Another thing to mention, I am not going to install this yet because I totally spaced. I'm going to get new copper washers. Called Mazda. They had to order some. Of course, they didn't have any in stock, but I'm sure these could probably be reused, but for $4, I'd rather have the peace of mind of having some fresh copper washers rather than a fuel leak on top of my engine. So those are going to be coming in, I believe, tomorrow, and then I should be able to hopefully pick up my injectors tomorrow as well and put this thing back together. Here's the rest of the injector parts I'm replacing in the system. These here are grommets go on the bottom of the fuel rails. These are diffusers. There are primary and secondary diffusers. When I'm doing this job, I only replace the primaries unless the secondaries are broken, which you're not going to be able to tell until you pull them off. But typically, they're not broken. I've never seen a set broken when I pull off. They usually only break when people pull them out. Then I only replace the primaries because they have this rubber section here. I don't know if you can see this. See if it can zoom. So this is actually a little rubber O-ring on here, and it actually gets compressed. So that's why I replaced the primaries. These are in pretty good shape. Higher mileage ones you can touch and look at wrong, and they'll crack and break apart, and it'll actually drop down into the intake portion. Seen it happen before. You can fish them out if you absolutely have to, because you don't want to leave that in your engine and turn it over. These only go in one way. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but there is a little lobe right here. There you go. I think you can see right there. It's not perfectly round, so there's a little lobe, so they only drop in one way. These are really only good for the stock injectors. If you're running an aftermarket injector, the more modern technology, they do not need these. You're probably going to have a different fuel rail, and the new modern injectors have a better spray pattern, better atomization than these. So, but this is one thing I do replace. Here's the new ones right here. Secondaries, just leave in there. You should be pretty good. These actually end up pressing against the bottom here, and it acts as like a seal. And this grommet is more like a sleeve that actually fits on the primary like that. So that makes a vacuum seal on top of the block. These feel pretty good. Everything's in pretty good shape. No complaints on this car pulling everything apart so far. Like I said, it is low miles, so I did have some vacuum lines that were pretty crunchy, and if you touched them, they would break. But for the most part, a lot better shape than the higher mileage cars I've done this on. Alright guys, I got the injectors back from the injector cleaner. They look great, so it's time to install them. Numbers came back from the flow, and they didn't look too bad, honestly. They were all even. I didn't have one injector that was real dirty compared to the rest of them, which was to be expected. The car runs and idles great now. The primaries gained about 30 cc flow, and the secondaries were kind of surprising. The secondaries actually gained about 100 cc of flow, so I am glad I went and got all these cleaned. A little bit more peace of mind, because that 100 cc could cost an engine when you start modding this. I'm planning on running these, the not quite max, but I'm shooting for probably 300, 350 tops, which, if you know the FD's 350 is really close to the top of the factory fuel system. So I just want to make sure these are in tip-top shape, a little bit of peace of mind, and keep this running the way it is. Quick shout out to Boost Lab. They're the ones that did the cleaning. I've known that owner for probably over 15 years through various business transactions and ordeals. A truly stand-up guy, makes great products. So yeah, a lot of people don't realize they do injector cleanings. They're known for their turbos, great turbos. But it's nice to have somebody local I can just drive down and drop these things off and work with them if I have any issues. Yeah, let me get these put together. Alright, and there you have it. Both fuel rails are assembled. I got new hoses everywhere, vacuum line, clean injectors. I did want to show you real quick. These are the other grommets for the injectors. You can see I'm not putting anything on here because those are the grommets we actually put into the lower intake manifold that go around the diffusers. For the primaries, these ones actually go up over this rail and slide onto this collar like that. So it's easiest to put them on here first. I've known people to actually put them into the block first, and then when they go put it in the rail, it'll catch on this lip here, and then they'll fold them in there, and they'll run into idle issues and create a big leak. So they're pretty snug right here. They're not going to fall off. So best bet is to put them like this right before you put them in the car. Like I said, I always put like a real thin coat of two-stroke on there, and you're ready to go. Here's what we're looking at with the fuel rails and everything removed. Replace the oil injector hoses. This is a pressure hose that comes off the manifold. Don't remember exactly what that goes up to, but that goes, I believe, to the back of the upper intake manifold. It's ACV gasket here. You don't want to forget this piece here. This is a spacer that goes underneath the primary fuel rail right there. If you don't have that, then it's gonna be pushing down too hard, and you'll actually break those diffusers. This is where the secondary diffusers go. But yeah, we're ready to put the injectors, fuel rails, injectors, and everything back in, and start putting this thing together. Got everything put in. Actually really simple with the harness pulled out of the way. Got plenty of room to work with. Looks really nice in there with the new hoses, new dampener, pressure regulator, new hose. I know most people don't replace this one, but I figured why not since I had everything out. But it's going good. Looks nice and clean. Now let me get this rat's nest in here. Here's all the vacuum lines replaced in the rat's nest. All the solenoids replaced with new ones. See nice clean filters on the ones that need filters. The only hose I did not replace on this entire mechanism is this one right here, and there's a reason for that. I might try to source one, but this one actually feels pretty good right now. Uncommonly known. Most silicone hose kits are not fuel and oil resistant. So you do not want to use these type of silicone for like a turbo oil drain or something. And this particular hose right here is for your vapor canister. So the way that works is your vapor from your fuel tank is coming in through this line right here, through this little S hose, and this is kind of like a filter deal. I did put silicone in this one. I'll just have to keep an eye on it. It shouldn't be that bad because all the vapor is going to be essentially sitting in here and in the filter. I'm not worried about these hoses here because this solenoid switches on during certain conditions and actually allows you to pull the vapor into the intake manifold. So it's not like fuel vapor is going to be sitting in these hoses. Just from this check valve back, shouldn't be too much in here, but like I said, this is going to be one I'll have to keep an eye on. They'll soften up. I've done this for years and I've never had an issue with this, but I would rather not risk using it for this one here. Same thing goes for the oil pedestal neck. I won't use silicone for those for the same reason, because there's going to be oil draining back through those. So I'd rather get the oil resistant hoses for that. A couple tips on removing these. If you have the really hard lines, don't try to break them off or anything. Even with a razor blade, sometimes people would recommend getting a razor blade and you making a little cut right here and trying to twist them off. That doesn't really work when you have the rock hard lines. The best way to get those off is just get a lighter and slowly rotate it with the lighter up underneath. And it doesn't take much. You don't want to melt the plastic around it. The rubber just needs to be hot to the touch, but it'll soften it enough to where it'll essentially pull it right off. So once you get it, rotate the lighter on it, give it a quick twist, make sure it's loose, and then pull it off. And that usually works. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of broken solenoids. But yeah, that's what it looks like when you get your hoses done. Now it's time to throw it back in. I got the rat's nest put back in, my fuel lines hooked up down here. One thing I like to do is I'll temporarily put my alternator wire back on and hook up the battery. I totally forgot to tell you to take that off when you first start, just because you're going to be working with wrenches right there and it's easy to ground. I need to get a new boot. But before you put everything back together, it is good to pressure test your fuel system, make sure you don't have any leaks, because I touched every bit of fuel underneath here. In order to do that, you got this little diagnostic plug right here. It's got a little key, super nice. You got the ground here on the right, and then FP stands for fuel pump, and you essentially just jumper those to complete the circuit. Here I made just a little jumper wire. You can listen here. There you go. You can hear the fuel pump running. Took all your lines. I usually let it run for a couple minutes. You could even, if you wanted to, you can take this hose off this far right one here. This is your fuel pressure regulator hose. This one actually goes back to the fuel pressure regulator, so you can actually pull that off the solenoid. If you have one of those little Mighty Vac vacuum / pressure pumps, you can actually hook that up to pressure, pump it up, and it simulates boost. So when you pull this off, or the way it should be right now, it should be at atmospheric pressure. You pull it off and put 10 or 15 pounds in there, and that'll actually raise the fuel pressure just like it would as if you were boosting. And that'll pressure test your fuel system to real drivability. But I'm not smelling any fuel. I'll let it run like this for like another 30 seconds, and then I'll turn it off and do a good sniff test all around. But right now I think it's going to be pretty solid. And we are back. So this is what the finished product looks like when you get all your rat's nest in, all your vacuum lines connected that you can connect at this point, and ready to throw the upper intake manifold on, with the exception of my oil filler neck, which is right here. I'll show you why here in a minute. Everything looks good. These two connect. This one connects. This is a vacuum pressure source from the manifold itself, so that plugs into a nipple on the manifold. This is your double throttle control. This I am actually hooking up to the double throttle, but I am not going to hook up the solenoid for right now. It's not really needed, but it fails to open for the butterflies to open. So I'm just hooking up the hoses in case I do want to use it down the road. But I don't really drive my car hard until it warms up. So that's one thing that people typically delete on these. The reason why I don't have it hooked up is because I don't have an extra check valve, one-way check valve, so I'm just going to leave that disconnected for now and have a plugged hose in case I want to get another check valve, but most likely I'm going to leave that disconnected. Super happy with the spark plug wires. fitment is spot on. Like I said, they're numbered. Everything looks good. So, all right. So one last thing I'm replacing. Wasn't really expected. This is typical for these. Mine was not leaking. But when I pulled this off, I noticed there was some silicone around here and some silicone on the block as well. This O-ring just kind of gets flat, and these tend to leak. I'm not a fan of using silicone, especially for something like this. It can kind of fall into the pan and then plug up your pickup. So, order this from Mazda, just another O-ring. For some of you old school guys that have been building rotors for a while, I use Hylamar for a lot of stuff. We used to use this for the oil control rings. A lot of guys these days just use Vaseline or petroleum jelly, but Hylamar is great for sealing different O-rings and hoses and whatnot. So it doesn't dry like silicone. It's safe with fuel and coolant and oil. So that's kind of what I use. So I'll just throw a thin coat of this Hylamar on the new O-ring, attach it, and then install in the car. In addition to all the solenoids underneath the intake manifold, I did replace these as well. This comes as a set, both solenoids. I think it's a turbo control or turbo pre-control and the wastegate control. Super easy to replace, self-explanatory. It's got 2 hoses on each, 2 connectors. These ones you just replace. You don't even have to take off the upper intake manifold. But we're just about finished here and about ready to fire up. All right, there you have it. Everything's back together. Job wasn't too bad. I'd say probably have about 6 hours into doing this, including stopping, filming, things like that. So it's a solid 6-hour job. Probably more if you're not very mechanically inclined, but if you have a basic set of hand tools, some angle pliers and stuff, you really can get this job done. It's just the main thing is taking your time. But 100% stock engine bay. Time to go take it for a drive. Alright, time to test out the sequential operation. See how it feels.